Good morning, dear friends, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship at Stony Brook. I welcome you who are here in our sanctuary and all who are attending virtually, wherever you may be this morning. My name is Maureen Shaman, and I am happy to be your worship associate this morning. Our minister is the Reverend Dr. Madeline Campbell, and our Director of Religious Education is Deb Little. Please plan to join us after the service for coffee and conversation and potluck. For those who are with us online, if you sign off after the service and return to our website, you will find the link for joining our small group chats. Whether here or online, you will find some friendly folks who can answer any questions you may have. Please silence your electronic devices, and whether you brought a dish to share or not, we welcome you to stay after the service for our international potluck. Members of the Engelhardt family, Sam and Jeff, will light the chalice this morning as I read the chalice lighting by Emily Kimbrough. I'm sorry, did I say Sam? I meant Sawyer. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Remember, we all stumble, every one of us. That's why it's a comfort to go hand in hand.
To amend my carnivorous habits. Made it nearly 70 days, losing weight without speed, eating sunflower seeds, drinking lots of carrot juice and soaking up rays. But at night I had these wonderful dreams, some kind of sensuous treat, not zucchini, fettuccine, or burger wheat, but a big warm bun and a huge hunk of meat. Burger in paradise, heaven on earth with an onion slice. Not too particular, not too precise, I'm just a cheeseburger in paradise. Heard about the old-time sailor man, they eat the same thing again and again. Warm beer and bread, they said, could raise the dead. Well, it reminds me of the menu at a Holiday Inn. But times have changed for sailors these days. When I'm in port, I get what I need. Not just Havanas or bananas or daiquiris, but that American creation on which I feed. Cheeseburger in paradise, medium rare with mustard be nice. Heaven on earth with an onion slice. I'm just a cheeseburger in paradise. I like mine with lettuce and tomato, Heinz 57 and French fried potatoes, big kosher pickle and a cold draft beer. Well, good God Almighty, which way do I steer for my cheeseburger in paradise? Making the best of every virtue and vice, worth every damn bit of sacrifice to get a cheeseburger in paradise. I need a cheeseburger in paradise. I'm just a cheeseburger in paradise.
So much to the UU4, John Seppala, Pete Cotta, Greg Maggio, and Ariana Cotta. It was Wendy's idea to annoy the vegans. I'm delighted to introduce our service leader, Wendy Engelhardt. Wendy and her husband, Jeff, came to UUism when they were married at the UU Fellowship of Huntington 27 years ago and became members of our fellowship about 16 years ago. She has served our congregation as a religious educator, an RE committee member, a staff member at Sophia Phi's UU camp, which is coming up next month, a singer with the Unicorn Singers, helper at Grounds and Sounds, and she joined our Worship Associates team last year. She and Jeff have raised 3 lovely, remarkable children. When she wasn't busy with that, Wendy received her MSW from Stony Brook University and has been a one-to-one special education aide with Longwood and Patchogue Medford School District for the last 8 years.
Wow, I got tired just listening to that. Holy cow, I did all that? Good morning. Well, if you've lived on Long Island for any length of time, you know of and perhaps have had your share of traditionally Long Island delectables, like arguably the best pizza, bagels, and Chinese food on this side of the Queensboro Bridge. Beyond those carb and sodium-laden delights, there's practically every international culinary fare on the map available within a short distance, from halal to Polish, from Cuban to Afghani, from Indian to Caribbean, and so much more. Whatever your palate craves, you're never too far from any of your delicious desirables. Now, if you've ever had the pleasure of attending any event here at the fellowship that includes a potluck collection of tins and Tupperwares filled with more savory and sweet sensations than you can imagine, then you know exactly how grateful we are that the creation of the UUFSB cookbook finally came to pass. I hope there's going to be sequels. Like many of other families, we gather at these tables here with everything from a single cup of coffee or a bowl of steaming soup in the winter to a plate piled high, ready to share conversation and comfort between bites. If you pay attention to the news, then you're all too familiar with those in dire food insecurities right here on our shared barrier island, including our neighbors, our students, our coworkers, perhaps even ourselves. Also, I'll talk a bit today about where Long Islanders can find help filling their pantries and feeding their families. So, what am I talking about? Food, glorious food. It motivates us, it triggers us, it captivates us, it brings us together. It symbolizes us. Sometimes it even haunts us late at night when our tummies grumble for a snack. Throughout generations, food has even woven its way into our everyday vernacular. See if you hear some of your favorites. He's a good egg, in a nutshell, in a pickle. Let them eat cake. She got her just desserts. Man does not live by bread alone. Not for all the tea in China, pie in the sky. Don't spill the beans, the toast of the town baker's dozen, as alike as 2 peas in a pod, as cool as a cucumber. There's no use crying over spilled milk, and you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. Easy as pie. Sour grapes. The big cheese, the best thing since sliced bread. The proof is in the pudding. Revenge is a dish best served cold. And perhaps you can help me with my final one. When life gives you lemons, make lemonade. In every culture around the globe, we gather, we celebrate, we mourn, we share, we eat. With that in mind, I offer you Toddler Dinner Time, a resolution in rhyme from Verily Victoria Vocalizes blog. I really don't love cooking, but I really do love you. For you, I would do anything, even learn to cook a stew. In my head, I keep a list of foods that you prefer. I know you like to help, so I'll always let you stir. I cook for health and taste and put a rainbow on your plate. I time it oh so carefully, not too early, not too late. Finally, the moment comes to call you to your chair. We start the meal with such high hopes, but soon there comes despair. It makes your mama sad to see salmon on the floor, mashed potatoes on the walls, peas rolling out the door. I know that before bedtime you just want to have more fun, but you haven't even had one bite when I hear you shout, "All done!" So I've decided in the future I'm going to save more time. You can have a sandwich. Mummy's having wine.
Our opening hymn this morning is in the Teal Hymnal, number 1067, Mother Earth, Beloved Garden. We will enact the earth-centered pagan ritual of calling the four directions and their attendant elements in acknowledgement and gratitude for the earth as giver of all food. Please rise in body or spirit and begin by facing north, which is this corner by the pulpit. And for the next verse, we will turn east to the corner by the piano, then south, the corner by Pastor Madeline's office, and west, the door to the RE wing. 1067 in the Teal. Now for the fun audience participation segment. In our Time for All Ages today, Wendy and I will take turns reading our favorite movie food quotes. Listen carefully and see if you can guess the movie, and for non-existent bonus points, the character and/or actor. Shout out your answers. We'll start relatively easy and progress from there, and we'll repeat answers so people online.
Am I? Yep, I'm good. All righty, so we're going to start off kind of easy. Mom always said life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Forrest Gump, Tom Hanks.
As God is my witness, I'll never be hungry again. Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind.
Fish are friends, not food. Close.
Close. Is a shark.
Barry Humphries is the voice of Bruce the shark in Finding Nemo.
Food fight!
Yes.
John Belushi as John Bluto Blutarski in Animal House.
All right, this one thanks to Sawyer, okay? Here we go. Hey, you guys, look. I know I'm just the dude that carries the bags, but it seems to me we all play an important part in this group. I mean, we're just like a big, delicious banana split. Fred, you're the big banana. Daphne, you're the pastrami and bubblegum flavored ice cream. And Velma, you're the sweet and sour mustard sauce that goes on top. Scooby-Doo, yes. Matthew Lillard as Shaggy Rogers in Scooby-Doo.
Red wine with fish. That should have told me something.
You want to do it again?
Red wine with fish. That should have told me something.
We got him.
We got him. That's James Bond, the first Bond, Sean Connery, in From Russia with Love.
Russia with Love. Nico, don't play with your food. When I was your age, we didn't have food. Lainey Kazan as Maria Portocalos in My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Carlos. Sonny, true love is the greatest thing in the world, except for a nice MLT, mutton, lettuce, and tomato sandwich where the mutton is nice and lean and the tomato is ripe. But they're so poiky. I love that.
That's right. Billy Crystal as Miracle Max in The Princess Bride.
Princess Bride, my favorite movie.
Okay, you ready? And finally, this well-placed line was spoken by a very special movie extra. In what well-known setting, in what well-known movie? I'll have what she's having.
Rob Reiner's mother, Estelle Reiner. Very, very good. Please join us now in reading responsively number 727, The Bread We Share, in the Gray Hymnal. Wendy will join you in reading the response in italics. Italics. 727. The bread we share this day is sacred.
Grain, gift of earth, gives life.
The friendship we share this day is sacred.
All gatherings when people meet and touch celebrate life.
The laughter we share this day is sacred.
Joy and sorrow that rise from love are springs of life.
The stillness we share this day is sacred.
In this peace is a haven for the spirit which nurtures life.
For bread, for friends, for joy and sorrow.
For the comfort of quietness, let us ever be grateful and caring. I will now lead us into meditation by reading a segment of author T.W. Barrett's prologue to his book, Long Island Food. Please listen to his words regarding food and meal prep growing up in the 1960s. And then, while we share a silent moment of meditation, take the time to remember what meal times were like when you were growing up. After the silence, we will sing hymn number 1009 in the Teal hymnal, Meditation on Breathing. You may want to flip to that now so you have it at the ready later. After the piano intro, we'll sing the drone, or bottom line, through twice, the melody, or top line, through twice, and then the descant, or middle line. Middle line. And after a few more times, we'll wind our way back down to the drone. If any of that didn't make any sense to you, then just sing along with whatever line you prefer. Again, hymn 1009. I was well into my teenage years before I realized that there was more to food than TV dinners. I'm ashamed to admit that I considered the TV dinner to be an Epicurean wonder. It was my ethnic food. The perfect aluminum packaging, the geometric sections that held each food item, and the very idea that the main course and the dessert could coexist side by side inspired endless fascination. The fact that we could enjoy our piping hot turkey with gravy, whipped mashed potatoes, sweet peas, and an apple cobbler while watching an episode of Bewitched was just the icing on the cake. Clearly, I had a limited frame of reference when it came to food. I grew up on suburban Long Island in the 1960s. Life was catapulting toward the space age. New home construction was booming. Convenience and economics drove food purchases. Our young mother with 4 boys needed meal options that were affordable and easy to assemble. It was all about feeding the family 3 square meals a day. White bread, Jell-O, and tuna casserole. That's what I remember. Our idea of haute cuisine was pigs in a blanket. A cone of Carvel soft-serve vanilla ice cream with sprinkles, enjoyed lustfully in the back seat of a Ford station wagon, was a real treat.
The Health Food Diner by Maya Angelou. No sprouted wheat and soya shoots and Brussels in a cake, carrot straw and spinach raw. Today I need a steak. Not thick brown rice and rice pilaf or mushrooms creamed on toast, turnips mashed and parsnips hashed. I'm dreaming of a roast. Health food folks around the world are thinned by anxious zeal. They look for help in seafood kelp. I count on breaded veal. No smoking signs, raw mustard greens, zucchini by the ton, uncooked kale and bodies frail are sure to make me run. To loins of pork and chicken thighs and standing ribs so prime, pork chops brown and fresh ground round, I crave them all the time. Irish stews and boiled corned beef and hot dogs by the scores, or any place that saves a space for smoking carnivores.
Leave it to Miss Angelou, huh? As the saying goes, never trust a skinny cook. And I suppose the same can be true for someone who gets up in front of you lovely people to speak confidently and enthusiastically about food. All those who are curvy, dare I say voluptuous, may or may not be able to describe themselves as a foodie, but I do. By definition, being a foodie is being a person having an enthusiastic interest in the preparation and consumption of food, and in my case may drive their family a little bonkers by taking a photo or 2 or 20 of some edible or another for future sharing or posting. That said, hi, I'm Wendy Engelhardt, and I'm an unapologetic, self-respecting, and as my husband likes to say, spirited foodie. Many of my early food memories revolve around my grandpa, Fred Romanofsky. That's his portrait right down there. In my mind, I vividly see a very little me balanced on the metal crossbar of his bicycle as he pedaled us to his favorite bagel shop in Long Beach most Sunday mornings, and then returned to our small family gathering with a bike basket full of fresh, still warm bagels, carefully packed sliced lox, and plenty to schmear. And then there was his jungle-like, lush and bountiful vegetable garden that was his backyard. He would point out every bud, every helpful creature, and I felt like Thumbelina between the towering growth. Inevitably, he'd pick a sugar snap pea from a vine or a sprig of parsley or a radish straight from the soil, and in his assertive post-laryngectomy gravelly voice, he'd say, "Eat this." So I did. And please, don't get me started on his trips to the Belmont racetrack where he retrieved all the free fertilizer he could fill in barrels and fit in his 4-door sedan, much to my grandmother's dismay. You did not want to be living downwind of 433 East Olive Street on a hot summer day. However, he did make up for it at harvest time, when he shared his bounty with neighbors far and wide. Then there were the trips into New York City, when I would often trail along as he managed his self-owned, self-run restaurant cooking oil supply business. We would visit his various customers in Lower Manhattan, Chinatown, Little Italy. They would all greet him like an old friend. As I gawked at the hanging meat in the windows, listened to the loud foreign chatter, and become enveloped in the aromas of the specialty of the day. He eventually became a silent partner in the Jade Cockatoo, a long ago shuttered Chinese restaurant in Washington Square Park across from NYU. Flashes of him waving away menus and instead walking into the kitchen to order our food for family dinners flit through my memory. So whether it was due to the Thanksgiving dinners or Passover crowds around their dining room table, or maybe just a bowl of homemade borscht, or the abundance of zucchini bread, or even the house smelling of mint all winter as the leaves he picked in the fall dried in his finished attic bedroom. You could easily say, I attribute my love and respect for good food from Grandpa. Thank you. Now a poem called Spring Soil by Michael Ratcliffe. Kneel beside me in the garden and feel the soft, moist dirt, warmed again after winter's freeze, turned and readied for planting. Scoop it. Feel it in your hands. Crush the clods in your palms. Squeeze the dirt through your fingers until your hands are rich with black dermis of soil. The earth is part of us. In our psyche and our souls, it is our past, our present, and our future. So, my sons, descendants of farmers who wrote lives in the earth, take this soil, hold it in your hands, feel the moist warmth radiate, and no matter what you do or where you go in life, turn a spade full of dirt each spring. Take the soft, warm earth in your hands and feed your soul. As we know, food doesn't just come from the ground, it also comes from the waves of immigrants that brought their delicious recipes from their homelands. So let's talk about the varieties of scrumptious international delights that can be found right here in Long Island. What I want to hear from you is your favorite international foods you found here. With no disrespect to our amazing pizza, bagels, and Chinese places, let's instead focus outside the takeout box, if you will. If you're joining us online, please enter your favorites in the chat box, and I respectfully ask the tech team to verbally share them with us later. I suggest you pay close attention to what people say and to who said it, because if you hear something enticing, you now have an amazing conversation starter for coffee hour. I'll begin with halal foods, including falafel, shawarma, and kebabs. So let's go. Let's see what you got. Anybody? Just call it out. Ooh, clay ovens and center H. Anybody?
Chana masala and tikka masala.
Dosa.
Dosa from Hicksville.
Anybody else? Call them out.
Thai food from anywhere. Pad Thai. Sí, empanadas. Especially fire only Morris.
Mexican food at Uta, Oaxaca.
Ooh.
Uta, Oaxaca? Oaxaca. Mexican food. Turkish food, Istanbul Cafe.
We have to look for that one.
Lots of stuff from Trader Joe's. Ton of it.
German food at Aldi's. You always see it there. All right.
What about online? Is there anything in the chat? Okay.
All right. Well, you got some ideas flowing. If you haven't already, please take notice of the variety of Long Island-based cookbooks and restaurant review books that I have here on the table, which describe some of the variety of foods and wines that can be found, grown, fished, created, ordered, and sold on Long Island. And during coffee hour, you're welcome to peruse them. In Long Island Food, a history from family farms and oyster to craft spirits, author T.W. Barrett says, "At the heart of Long Island food is the family farm, Although if you were to survey the average man or woman on the street today, they'd probably have no clue about Long Island's farming heritage. Farming seems so old-fashioned in this high-tech world, and sadly, so much evidence of our farming society has been paved over, literally. However, when European settlers first populated Long Island in the early 17th century, their primary objective was to feed the family. In 1820, 95% of Long Islanders lived on farms. From the mid-1800s to the 1950s, immigrant farmers from Germany, Italy, and Eastern Europe and China established truck farms. They raised vegetables and fruit, as well as asters and dahlias, and thanks to the onset of the Long Island Railroad, were able to ship their goods to nearby auction markets or directly into New York City. Of course, as everywhere else in the U.S., that 95% shrank steadily as the population increased and congregated in towns. But we had all the usual crops and livestock and some special ones. For instance, did you know that in the first half of the 20th century, Suffolk County was the third largest producer of cranberries in the nation? Yeah, I didn't know that either. Thanks, Maureen. You probably know about the ducks. After 4 white Pekin ducks, as they were then called, arrived on our shores in the 1870s, Long Island duck farms multiplied. By the 1960s, they produced 7.5 million ducks a year from 4. But those farms were pressured to sell as environmental regulations, suburban sprawl, and real estate prices increased. The second to the last closed in 2013, yet one remains, crescent duck. So, if you eat poultry, you might consider a locally sourced duck for the holidays this year. My family learned about Long Island farms disappearing before our very eyes soon after we moved into our Middle Island home just about 22 years ago. While wheeling my then baby Sam and his stroller around our new neighborhood, we met an elder, Miss Franny, as she asked us to call her, who had lived a few houses down away with her older sister all their lives. She often shared stories of growing up right on that very same road our homes were on now, except that it looked a lot different when she was a young girl. The entirety of Oakcrest Avenue was once her father's farm. The east side of the road, where our house was later built in 1972, was where their farmhouse was situated. And across the road was the cow pasture, livestock being one of the original mainstays of Long Island. I'm assuming that's why that side of the road still has the best-looking lawns. Enough said. In 1973, the New York Times reported that between 40 and 60% of the 60,000 acres of farmland in the East End are already owned by developers or investment syndicates. Between 1940 and 1972, the number of potato farms dropped from over 1,000 to 200. Without some sort of government intervention, there will be no farms left in Suffolk County in 15 or 20 years. Developers thought that this was the natural order of things. One even said, in the natural economic flow, this valuable economic land would be used for housing, not so some kid from Manhattan who's never seen a farm can get in a car and drive by. If a farmer can't stay in business, he should quit and move to Kansas or Nebraska. He shouldn't be subsidized. Well, he didn't get his way entirely. A whole bunch of those potato farms were converted in the 70s and 80s and 90s to wineries. There are now 57 wineries here, which Maureen says is her favorite part of Long Island. The amount of land devoted to agriculture on Long Island has remained steady at more than 37,000 acres since 1992, much smaller than the past, but a consistent amount of land for almost 3 decades. Although Long Island is home to the nation's first suburb, it has retained its agricultural identity. Today, more than 100 varieties of crops, as well as poultry and cattle, are raised here, making it New York's top-grossing agriculture region. Agriculture employs more than 10,000 people on Long Island. Part of the growth on the East End is driven by Farms for the Future, a program sponsored by the nonprofit Peconic Land Trust that provides mentorship and inexpensive land to those interested in becoming farmers, according to the New York Times. Perhaps even more importantly than this is, after all, an island. Before the Dutch began referring to this region as Lank Island, I learned that it was a Native American tribe that called Long Island Siwanhaki, which roughly translates to Isle of the Shells, obviously referring to the ability to live off the abundance of what lives in the waters. As many generations of Long Islanders once turned to our surrounding waters for their livelihood, survival, or sport, I believe they would agree with it being Siwanhaki. And yet it's no secret that this industry, this entire way of life, has diminished substantially, as Billy Joel's tune, Down Eastern Alexa, explains, beautifully shared by Maureen and Bethany 2 weeks ago. There ain't much future for a man who works the sea, he sings. There ain't no island left for islanders like me. The fisherman blames mostly fuel prices, fuel taxes, and state regulations they feel are unfair. Others blame the huge factory vessels, both foreign and American, which were the main causes of overfishing. Climate change doesn't help. Superstorm Sandy, for example, took a massive toll on the industry, and it's not clear if the funds allocated by Congress ever reached Long Island's fishermen, at least the ones who were still around in 2015. Most of the seafood sold on the island is imported from Japan, China, and elsewhere. There are still some commercial fishing trawlers operating out of Freeport, Bayshore, Patchogue, Shinnecock, and one in Greenport if it's still there, but it's not clear whether this industry will survive. A New York seafood marketing task force was signed into law in 2017, but repealed in 2018. Certainly it's difficult for anyone who works on the East End to afford to live there.
Mussels by Mary Oliver. In the riprap, in the cool caves, in the dim and salt-refreshed recesses, they cling. In the dark clusters, in barnacled fistfuls, in dampness that never leaves, in the deeps of the high tide, in the slow washing away the water in which they feed, in which the blue shells open a little and the orange bodies make a sound, not loud, not unmusical, as they take nourishments, as the ocean enters their bodies. At the low tide, I am on the riprap, clattering with boots in a pail, rock over rock. I choose the crevice, I reach forward into the dampness, my hands feeling everywhere for the best, the biggest. Even before I decide which to take, which to twist from the wet rocks, which to devour, they, who have no eyes to see with, see me, like a shadow, bending forward. Together they make a sound, not loud, not unmusical, as they lean into the rocks, away from my grasping fingers.
So far I've shared about the abundance and variety of food here on our island, but it wouldn't be very UU of me to celebrate the abundance without acknowledging those with food insecurities. Sometimes hearing, seeing, or reading about people not knowing where their next meal is coming from makes us so uncomfortable. We honestly don't know what to do, so some do nothing at all. With my hands up here like this, like blinders, I don't see it, or at least I can pretend not to see it, so maybe, just maybe, I won't feel guilty or helpless. Perhaps all it takes is a reminder from our own UU principles to refresh our hearts, bodies, and spirits that it is our responsibility to do something, I remind my family to do every time one of us walks out the door. Take care of yourself and each other. But it's much bigger than that. It's much bigger than Sam, Phoebe, and Sawyer, my three musketeers as I call them. It's much bigger than all of us here and you sitting at your screens. My kids have often asked me which one of them is my favorite child. And my answer is always the same, our cat Dottie. And like offspring, I suppose you're not supposed to have a favorite UU principle, but I do. The first one, each of us has inherent worth and dignity. I remember when Sawyer and I went driving for the first time since the COVID lockdown. We were on our way to Prosser Pines, a lovely walking trail and preserve near our home, a good way to stretch our legs. On our way, we passed a man standing with his young son near the driveway entrance of Middle Island's Walmart. Both father and son were well dressed and clean, but wore sad expressions on their faces. The father held a sign large enough for passing cars to see that read, "Out of work, anything will help." That man represented any one of us. He was one of us, a resident of our town. His child could have been in my son's school. He put his pride aside long enough to put himself out there and ask his neighbors for help. Being part of the paycheck-to-paycheck class ourselves, we stretch our dollars within their ripping point on a regular basis. This man spoke to me with his eyes and his sign. As a neighbor, as a UU, as a human, I couldn't just drive by. Waiting at the traffic light gave me the time to decide what I knew what was right all along. I pulled our car into the parking lot behind where the man and his son were standing. I parked, got out, and called out respectfully, "Sir," startling him above the traffic noise. Considering the times, COVID, and knowing I had hand sanitizer in the car, I reached out and shook his hand, saying to him, "My brother," because indeed that's how I felt at the moment, "may this humble offering help you to take care of your family." He smiled through tears, slowly took my cash, hugged his son close to him, and then said, "May God bless you." My reason for sharing this experience with you is not to pat myself on the back, just to simply remind us that he could have easily been any one of us. There are thousands of Long Islanders just like him, many struggling with ongoing insecurities with food, residency, and personal safety. According to the Long Island Cares, 2.7% of Long Islanders face food insecurities. That's over 220,000 people, 65,000 of whom are children. Nearly half of these are above the poverty level, but don't make enough to keep up with the high cost of living here. You might see someone pushing shopping carts filled with cans to return for money to exchange for food. You might see a parent at the cash register trying to decide between the chocolate milk or the package of chicken because the limited funds in their wallets don't allow for both. Your child might see a classmate not take out a snack at snack time because their family couldn't afford extras. Are we the person who pretends not to see, or worse yet, becomes impatient because we're next in line behind that parent at the register counting out coins or putting items back? When my children were little and rambunctious grocery store partners, there was more than one occasion when someone behind me offered to pay for the groceries I was handing back to the cashier. And I shook their hands in gratitude. Not just because I was able to bring home whatever that item was, but because I was grateful the universe, a power greater than myself, God, whichever you wish to reference, had sent me a human being with empathy and compassion. I promised myself that I would do the same thing when presented with the chance, and I have. That all boils down to my other favorite UU principle, number 7. This interdependent web of ours is just that, ours to take care of and respect. If not now, when? If not us, who? I was very moved by a pair of autobiographies I recently read, which I've also placed here on the table. They are Etched in Sand, written by Regina Calcaterra, and Girl Unbroken, with which Regina assisted her younger sister, Rosie Maloney, in writing. Allow me to read a few passages from chapter 1, Bitten Bones, in order to set the scene. Suffolk County, Long Island, New York summer, 1980. Long Island lacks a decent public transportation system. To get anywhere, you need either a car or a good pair of shoes. Our shoes aren't the best, and our car is worse. My mother's thick arm rests on the driver's side window ledge of her rusty, gas-guzzling Impala, the kind you buy for $75 at the junkyard. A little later, she writes about this car ride. None of us bothers hollering to ask where we're going. With all our belongings packed in garbage bags in the trunk, we know we're headed to a new home. Our short-term future could take many forms: a trailer, a homeless shelter, the back parking lot of a supermarket, in the car for a few weeks, in their mother's next boyfriend's basement or attic, or dare we dream, an apartment or a house. We know better than to expect much. To us, running water and a few mattresses is good living. We've managed with much less. I learned that Regina and her 4 siblings were the students who showed up with nothing to snack on and in pretty much the same clothes they'd worn for weeks. That is, if they were able to get to school at all. With their alcoholic mother in and out of the picture throughout their childhood, Regina and her siblings learned the art of clothes bin diving in the parking lot donation bins for their next outfits and pocketing essentials for survival without getting caught. Some of the pages were difficult to turn, some descriptions difficult to stomach. And I literally had to remind myself several times that I wasn't reading some author's fictional sharing of their imagination. This was a child's very real view, as written by their adult self, of survival right here in our county. The same county, the same island that also holds all those amazing international foods we all mentioned earlier. While I read, I recognized roads and towns, some barely a few minutes from where we're sitting right now, as places where they squatted for various lengths of time, places they traveled, and places where they were ignored. Nobody knew? Or is it more likely they knew, but either didn't care or didn't know what to do? In contrast, Regina and her siblings did have their heroes who helped them along the way. And although I promise not to give anything away should you choose to read these books for yourself, except for the fact that Regina Calcaterra was appointed Executive Director of New York State's Moreland Commission on Utility Storm Preparation and Response by Governor Andrew Cuomo after she assisted in the recovery of Superstorm Sandy in her capacity as Chief Deputy Executive of Suffolk County. She has provided commentary on politics and policy in national and local media outlets since the year 2000 and is a passionate advocate for the adoption of older foster children. This easily lends itself to my sharing information about local food pantries with which you may or may not be familiar. On your chairs, you should have found pamphlets from 2 agencies who serve our island: Community Solidarity and Engelhardt Food Pantry. Please hold on to them in that place where you save important resources and or share them with a friend, a family member, or neighbor who could make use of them. If all it takes is one phone call or email to relieve the stress of providing sustenance for one's family, then let these and you be that source. Thank you, Shelley, for putting me in touch with Kathy Leahy from Engelhardt Food Pantry, which in our 2 decades and counting of living in Middle Island, I wasn't even aware was walking distance from our home. Community Solidarity picks up fruits and vegetables from local supermarkets and distributes it. They say there are over 9,000 supermarkets and farms on Long Island. Combined, they waste over 27 million pounds of food every night. That's enough to feed every hungry Long Islander 45 times over. Now that Congress has let most of the anti-poverty spending that was created to deal with the pandemic expire, millions of people now on food stamps have just lost them, creating a surge in hunger in America. The safety net is shrinking again. According to Long Island Cares, the Harry Chapin Food Bank, the effects of hunger on the working poor range from lack of stamina and increased illness, which increases missed work time, to feelings of hopelessness and despair. Children who are hungry are more likely than their peers to experience behavioral issues. I've seen that. Reduced ability to learn social skills and impaired cognitive learning, even permanent brain damage. Seniors who are hungry experience depression and anxiety. They are also at increased risk for illness, disease, and even premature death. Many of these individuals are also mentally, physically, emotionally, or socially disabled and face limited employment opportunities, additional barriers, and/or may have difficulty feeding themselves. These are the faces of our island, students we teach, peers with which we share our day-to-day, co-workers who punch a time clock with us. That's often lost in the conversation, both literally and figuratively. These are our neighbors, and maybe ourselves too sometimes. There's a tendency toward not seeing class privilege that is common not only to UUs, but also to many of us here at UUFSB. Maureen shared with me that when she was on the board, the members were asked one December to pull $50 out of their wallets to contribute to the staff Christmas gifts, as they had always done. And she was shocked and dismayed because $50 was her entire Christmas budget that year. Our faith calls us not only to be sensitive to the facts that others may not be as privileged as we are, but to help others when and where we can, and also to recognize the structural inequality that creates this privilege, and to fight and dismantle it wherever we can. In his article this last March in the New York Times, Pulitzer Prize-winning socialist Matthew Desmond explains that poverty rates in the U.S. have varied some, but not much, over the last 50 years, not because of rollbacks in government and anti-poverty spending, but because the way our American economy is structured depends on the exploitation of the poor. He says that the United States offers some of the lowest wages in the industrialized world. More workers in the U.S. make low pay than in nearly any other industrialized country, nearly 25%, a quarter of American workers. Compare that with about 10% in Japan and about 5% in Italy. Housing markets also exploit the poor. It's not a housing shortage that has caused the recent exploitation in rents in poor neighborhoods. It's the fact that poor people, especially poor black families, don't have much choice when it comes to where they can live. So, landlords overcharge them. The poor pay, literally, more for many things. Bank excuse me, bank fees for low balances or check cashing fees, weekly motels instead of monthly apartments, 700% interest rates to banks for short-term loans. Loan sharks don't have rates that high. The question we should be asking is, who benefits? Not, why don't you find a better job, or why don't you move? But who is feeding off of this? Desmond argues, those who have amassed the most power and capital bear the most responsibility for America's vast poverty. Political elites who have utterly failed low-income Americans over the past half-century, corporate bosses who have spent and schemed to prioritize profits over families, lobbyists blocking the will of the American people with their self-serving interests, property owners who have exiled the poor from entire cities and fueled the affordable housing crisis. Acknowledging this and both crucial and deliciously absolving it directs our attention upward and distracts us from all the ways, many unintentionally, that we, the secure, the insured, the housed, the college-educated, the protected, the lucky, also contribute to the problem. Desmond continues. Corporation benefits from worker exploitation, sure, but so do consumers who buy the cheap goods and services the working poor produce, and so do those of us directly or indirectly invested in the stock markets. Landlords are not the only ones who benefit from housing exploitations. Many homeowners do too. Their property values propped up by the collective effort to make housing scarce and expensive. The banking and payday lending industries profit from the financial exploitation of the poor, but so do those of us with free checking accounts. And those accounts are subsidized by billions of dollars in overdraft fees. Living our daily lives in ways that express solidarity with the poor could mean we pay more. By acknowledging those costs, we acknowledge our complicity. Unwinding ourselves from our neighbors' deprivation and refusing to live as enemies of the poor will require us to pay a price. It's the price of our restored humanity and renewed country.
It is our spiritual practice to share the offering plate with an organization working for a more just future. For the month of July, beautifully combined, our social justice partner is one of the organizations Wendy mentioned, Island Harvest, Long Island's largest hunger relief organization. Their volunteers and staff deliver millions of pounds of food to a network of 570 food pantries, soup kitchens, and other organizations. Please give generously in support of the fellowship and this worthwhile organization. You may make your gifts on the plate or online. For those online, the link to donate is in the chat box. The offering will now be gratefully received.
Is it worth waiting for if we live till 84? All we ever get is gruel. Every day we say our prayer. Will they change the bill of fare? Still we get the same old gruel. There's not a crust, not a crumb can we find. Can we beg, can we borrow or cash? But there's nothing to is the question. Which gentlemen have it, boys? Indigestion. Food, glorious food. We're anxious to try it. 3 banquets a day. Our favorite diet. Just picture a great big steak, fried, roasted, or stewed. Oh, food, wonderful food, marvelous food, glorious food. Food, glorious food, don't care what it looks like. Burnt, underdone, crude, don't care what the cook's like. Just thinking of growing fat, our senses go reeling. One moment of knowing that, full of feeling. Food, glorious food, what wouldn't we give for that extra bit more? That's all we live for. Why shouldn't we fated to do nothing but brood on food? Magical food, wonderful food, marvelous food, fabulous food, beautiful food, glorious food.
Our closing words are by Deborah Smith, a prayer addressing all hungers. We are hungry. We are eating our daily bread and bowing our heads, and yet we are hungry. We are thanking the farmer and the farm worker, and yet we are hungry. We are speaking in spaces for food that is healthy, and still we are hungry. We are tired of slogans that say feed the children and mean feed the children leftovers. We are hungry for something that feeds more than bodies. We are hungry for help. Help us, O you who apportion the funds. Find in your hearts the child who you were, who would share with a friend, free and friendly. Lead us not into meanness. For we are the hungry. We want the loaves and the fishes and the water and the wine of sweet justice for all. We are hungry.
For our benediction, I share with you To Water in Excelsis by Richard M. Fuchs. To water in excelsis in vino veritas, as the Son of Man, or Jesus, came eating and drinking and made friends with the people of the earth regardless of social distinction or class. Let us strive to do likewise in our own eating and drinking, thinking and speaking, living and acting. Let us ever be thankful for the food we eat, the friends we share, the water and wine we drink, the air we breathe, and the songs we sing. Amen.
Got plenty and then some. What do I do? Plenty and then some. What do I do? I got plenty and then some. What do I do now? I go out and help somebody get plenty and then some too. Got a roof over my head. What do I do? What do I do? A roof over my head. What do I do? What do I do? I got a roof over my head. What do I do now? I go out and help somebody get a roof over their head too. I got supper on the table. What do I do? What do I do? I got supper on the table. What do I do? What do I do? I got supper on the table. What do I do now? Go out and help somebody get supper on the table too. That's what I do. 'Cause I got to give, I got to give, and when you got enough to give away, it's the only way to live. I got to give, I got to give, I got to give, I got to give. And when you got enough to give away, well, it's the only way to live. I'm going to heaven. I'm going to heaven. What do I do? What do I do? Yeah, I'm going to heaven. I'm going to heaven. What do I do? What do I do? Well, I'm going to heaven. I'm going to heaven. What do I do now? What do I do now? Go out and help somebody